a frightful place from which companies rose, the tales of terrible strategy woes, spooky stories of careless sense that false the customer experience. We'll bring you accounts so terribly gory that you'll run in fear for your journey mapping stories. To bury the chill of getting negative reviews and points off your NPS score, you may lose. So try to stay calm despite what the title entails, as we bring horrifying customer experiences tales.
Whoa, that's pretty creepy. We know many of you have heard some scary stories of bad customer experience, and we've got a few to share with you on this special Halloween episode of the CX Leader Podcast.
This spooky edition of the CX Leader Podcast with Steve Walker is produced by Walker, a business consulting firm that helps our clients unlock the potential of their customer experiences by placing the customer at the heart of all your business decisions. You can find out more at walkerinfo.com.
Hello, I'm Steve Walker, Chairman and CEO of Walker Information, also the host of the CX Leader Podcast, and thank you for listening. On the CX Leader Podcast, we explore topics and themes to help leaders like you leverage all the benefits of customer experience and help your customers and prospects want to do more business with you. And why do we want to help companies succeed? Well, frankly, to avoid the horror stories that you're about to hear today. These are the horror stories of CX. People who have observed or been victim of customer experience failures. We hope to share these stories in an effort to scare you into avoiding these kinds of CX situations. And joining me in the studio to help tell these stories is my friend and colleague, Pat Gibbons, Senior VP and Principal here at Walker, and also our resident storyteller. Pat, thanks for joining me on this scary episode of the CX Leader Podcast.
I would say it's a pleasure to be here, but I'm a little frightened by it.
Well, we got some things to scare the you-know-what out of you, so we got a great episode here. Actually, we got 4 great horror stories, so why don't you just go ahead and kick us off, Pat?
I will. So picture yourself on the highway, and all of a sudden you blow a tire. You know, most of us have been there, and it is a frustrating experience. But now, picture this woman, Lisa. Lisa is in a parking lot, which you'd think, well, that would be easier, particularly if you're in the parking lot of a place that could help you. Well, let's listen to Lisa tell her story.
My husband and I were in a large discount retailer with our 4 small children shopping. We came out to our car and had, trying to hang on to all 4 kids and had a grocery cart full to put in our trunk, and we had a flat tire in the middle of this parking lot. And so we loaded all the groceries in the car, walked back into the discount retailer because luckily they had a tire store right there on their property. So we thought, oh, this is perfect. So we went in and went to the tire center within this discount retailer and told of our story that, we just had come out to the car and loaded a cart full of groceries into our car, but we had a flat tire and could they please help us? And they told us that they were already booked for the day, that they didn't have anyone that could get to our tire for that day. And, so you see, these 2 young parents with 4 small children already explained that we just had purchased, a cart full of items from their store, and they could see how disappointed we were. And, even with a second try of saying, hey, we're really in a pinch, there's no way you can squeeze us in, they said no. So the moral of that story is, of course, we had to deal with the tire ourselves, and we didn't go back to that retailer for many, many years.
Well, that is a huge CX party foul there. when you've got the people on site and you can't deliver on that, that's huge.
Yeah, it's like being at a gas station changing your own tire, and I'm just the image of 4 little kids running around, and at first you're probably thinking, "Wow, we're right here." I mean, if we had to have a flat, perfect place to have it.
Yeah.
And then the disappointment, man.
And you wonder from the company's standpoint, is that the policy, or is it just the culture at that particular location, or is somebody not empowered to sort of authorize the overtime, or it just seems like it'd be so easy to take care of that deal.
It's a missed opportunity. They could have made their day and had a customer for life.
They could have, absolutely. Well, let's go from tires to airlines. It isn't too hard to find airline customer experience horror stories, but this one in particular is pretty interesting because it really has nothing to do with weather or equipment. It really is just a focus on the customer. So let's listen to Kim, and this too involves young children.
It was a few years ago. When my kids were much smaller. I had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old at the time. And we boarded the plane, and our seats were not together. So I asked the flight attendant if we could get seats together. And she looked at me like it had been the worst day of her life, and she was not willing to help. So I took it upon myself, of course. I've got a baby in my arms and a little one next to me, to ask the other people on the flight if they would switch seats with me, and no one would. So I just stood in the middle of the aisle, waiting and waiting to see if maybe the flight attendant would come back around and help. And finally, she came up to me and she said, I was looking forward to, oh, good. And she said, you need to sit down right now. We're getting ready to take off. So I looked at her and I said, my 5-year-old little girl is not sitting between these 2 grown men for a 2-hour flight to Florida. It's not going to happen. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. She did nothing to help me out. She did nothing to see this little girl with her big eyes looking up at her mommy going, I am not sitting between these two strangers. So eventually another customer on the flight, another passenger, he got up and he said, I'll switch seats with you. And I said, thank you so much. That just, that's really great. Well, we got 3 in a seat, and the flight attendant came up, and she offered the man who got up a drink for free and just looked at me like I had done something horribly wrong. Yeah, it was not a good experience. There was a letter written, there were emails and such written to them, and I did get a voucher. But after I had to go through all of that, trying to go see the grandparents in Florida with my 2 kids.
Well, here's one where, gosh, a little empathy could go a long way, don't you think?
Actually, I was just on a flight the other day, and they came on and said, they announced the flight attendants as there primarily for your safety, which is basically code for don't expect much service.
Yeah, right.
It's sort of like they're setting the expectations right there.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned before, there's so much to deal with that are out of their control.
Yeah.
The weather, delays, and people get frustrated, and it is a tough job. But there are times where it's about the people, and those issues, those are ones where the customer experience professionals should really focus on the people.
Yeah. And you think like in that business, that it's almost too easy to pick on the airlines. And the business model is so screwed up, but you think that they would be hiring for people that had empathy or that, could put themselves in the situation of a young mother.
Right.
It just doesn't seem that hard.
Yeah. Well, let's go from airlines to insurance.
Oh,
Everybody's favorite thing, making a claim. Well, here's a poor guy that had a fire at his house that caused significant damage. I believe he was out of the house for over a month and just had to constantly deal with the hassles of trying to get the claim settled. So let's hear what he has to say.
So in 2013, I was woken up about 1 in the morning to the sound of on my front door. And so I go downstairs, and someone says, "This is the police. You need to get out of your house right now." And at the time, I had my 4 kids. We had a foster baby, and we had my friend's 2 foster babies we were watching. So we had 7 kids in my house. So I say, "I'm not opening this door. I don't see your police car out here. I couldn't see through my door." I said, "I'm not doing it." So we argue back and forth. Well, then my wife sees smoke come across our front window. She's like, "I think you better open the door." So I open the door, and it's a police officer like, "Your house is on fire. You need to get out of the house right now." So we all come out of the house, and by the time the firemen are there, they take care of it. So, I call my insurance company, and they were an absolute nightmare to work with. Never responded to me. It would take them weeks sometime to give me an answer. Horrible, horrible experience dealing with the insurance company. Then we got through all of that, and I'd been with this insurance company for 15 years. I'd had 2 other claims, one for $500, one for 0, and then the fire. And they said, "Well, because you have had 3 claims, we're canceling your insurance." And because I had a fire, I now had to go to high-risk insurance, which cost a fortune and basically covered nothing. And so then after a year, I was able to get on regular insurance and that sort of stuff. So that's my CX horror story.
Yeah, this is a tough one because insurance really is a tough business. And full disclosure, I sit on the board of an insurance company, so I've also seen it from the other side as well. But claims really is the one opportunity that an insurance company has to do right by their customers.
There are certain experiences when I think about dealing with certain companies that you anticipate a bad experience. Mm-hmm. And making a claim is one of those, almost to the point where, I had one recently where, fender bender called in and it was a smooth process. And when you got through it, it was like, wow, that was great. It really wasn't that great. It's what it's supposed to be all the time. But because your expectations are so low, you feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
But obviously, in this guy's case, man, and, dealing with something like that, you're out of your house. And, he had all these kids there, 4 of them his own and a foster child. What do you do? I mean, that's one where you need somebody to show some love.
Yeah, and one of the things I think about customer experience is that the more personal it gets, the bigger the deal it is, So when it's your family or your kids that are being affected, that heightens even what might be a routine customer experience into one that is super, super sensitive. So
absolutely.
Because we all care about the people we love. Hey, let's lighten it up a little bit. We had a great story here from Jay Bear, who is a great storyteller, been a guest on the show, and he also is a frequent traveler. This one's a lot of fun, but listen to this one.
I travel a ton, and so I feel like I'm collecting CX horror stories by the basketful. But this one particularly sticks with me because I think all business travelers can identify with it. So much so that about a decade ago, I had my own blog, which was called Why So Complicated. And all the blog was, Steve, was photos of shower controls. Because I've discovered that there is a relationship between how fancy the hotel is and how inscrutable and indecipherable it is to turn on the shower water. They feel like, hey, you're paying a pretty good price for this hotel room, so let's make sure that this requires some sort of engineering degree. And the reason I literally had to call the front desk once because I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't get wet. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, it happens all the time. So that was about 10 years ago. 2 months ago, I was in a different hotel in Florida. It doesn't matter which one. I don't want to belabor the point here, but it was so hard to figure out how to use the shower that I suspect they had a lot of complaints. So some sort of CX professional, or lack thereof, but certainly somebody with CX intent, created a little diagram that they actually placed, literally like a plastic stand-up diagram that they placed in the shower next to the controls. The problem was the diagram was more confusing than the controls themselves. They actually took a bad situation, threw gas on it, and made it substantially worse. So if you can't get the CX right of a shower, I'm a little concerned about your larger CX initiatives.
Wow. The shower, hotels, really, when you think about it, it is a lot about the details. I mean, think about the things they've branded, like the heavenly bed and, all that sort of stuff. But that's important to business travelers or any traveler. And when something is complicated or hard. You just don't want it to be complicated when you're in a hotel room.
Yeah, one of my pet peeves in hotels is when your magnetic card demagnetizes. So I probably do it half the time with my phone or something, but you want some downtime when you're traveling, and you don't want to have sort of more inconveniences than you already take on just by doing the travel to start. But Jay Bear's a funny guy, and that one's pretty lighthearted. Nobody lost a house or had to worry about their kids there.
Right.
So
Nobody got hurt. And hotels are the type of organization that is embracing what the experience is all about, and also embracing the digital experience. I mean, some of the things they're doing with their
online
apps,
check-in,
and it's great. Picking out the room you're in, being able to open the door with your phone, all those sorts of things are, I think, really making hotels kind of the benchmark for some other industries.
Yeah, I think again, from the travel standpoint, the hotels and the rental cars too have come light years compared to the airlines in terms of just providing a better customer experience. What's your take on these horror stories, Pat? What's kind of your summary of all this?
Yeah, when I think about horror stories or bad customer experiences in general, I think at the root of it is when companies are thinking about their process over what the customer's going through. And my example is a simple one. It's not a horror story, but it's just an everyday story. And that is, a couple weeks ago, I went in for my annual physical. And so I'm going to take a shot at the healthcare industry here. But whenever I go to the doctor's office, I just kind of look around and I'm sort of fascinated by how much of it is about their process. So to give you a couple examples, they send me things so that I fill out the forms in advance. Now, again, I'll give you that they may be doing it to save me time, but I sort of think it's to help them out, that they have your forms in advance. Then I get reminders by phone, by text, and by email. Even after I've responded to the first one, I get more of them. And then it says, on the voicemail I get, it says, please come in 30 minutes early. I'm thinking, why? I don't think it's so they can get me in early, And then you walk in and I see just the little hints, signs and things, must have insurance card, check out here before you leave. All of that is just this tone that it's about their process and not ours. And my favorite, here's my favorite thing that I always like to point out, is when I go up to the desk and they have a little cup with pens in them that have a plastic flower taped to it. And, I look at that and go, why did they do that? It's so nobody takes the pen. Yeah. It's like, what? Go out and buy 10 dozen pens with your name on it so that anybody can just say, here, have the pen. Take 2 if you want.
Yeah, it is. It's totally the opposite of what a CX professional would design. Thank goodness that I think things are changing, and even in the healthcare profession, there's going to be more choice. I think that all these horror stories are kind of fun with Halloween. It's been a fun episode, but I think that the lesson here for the CX professional is take advantage of these opportunities to recover and take advantage of these teaching moments, if you will, to learn something. I actually had an experience just last week when I was traveling, and I got a quick survey from one of the major chains. And overall, I'd had a pretty good experience, but I did note one disappointing aspect. And wouldn't you know it, I got a email back from the general manager of that property right that day. I didn't get vouchers or anything. I really wasn't looking for anything, but it was just the fact that they actually did respond. I'm a loyal member of that chain, and so I intend to continue to be that.
Yeah, it's good when they just recognize you. I mean, a lot of times that's what people are looking for.
Yeah, and that is really the role of the CX professional, is to make sure that that's happening in your organization more often than it's not. If you can actually make it happen 100% of the time, I think that'd probably be good for your business. So, any parting thoughts, Pat, on this CX horror story special?
2 things come to mind. One is so obvious, and that is just empathy. You've got to try to do things not only for the CX professionals, but help people in your organization be able to put themselves in the customer's shoes. And then 2, look for those opportunities where you can go above and beyond, and you can surprise people and have people walk away going, wow, that was simple, or that was better than I expected. Those are, two things that, turn these horror stories around, make them something special.
Yeah. Good words of wisdom. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to this CX Horror Story Halloween special and had as much fun listening as we had putting it together. My guest for this special edition was Pat Gibbons, Senior Vice President and Principal here at Walker. Pat, thanks for being on the podcast as usual.
My pleasure.
And if you have a CX horror story, tell us about it. You can post it on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook with the hashtag CX Horror Story. Who knows, we might use your story on the next year's Halloween episode. Or if you'd like to talk about anything you heard on this episode or how Walker can help your business customer experience, you can contact me at steve.walker@walkerinformation.com or call me here in the U.S. at 1-317-843-8890. Don't hesitate to reach out to me, as I'd love to tell you more. Don't forget to subscribe to the CX Leader Podcast. You can go to walkerinfo.com/podcasts, and you'll also find links to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and on our own YouTube channel as well at youtube.com/walkerinformation. Thank you for listening to this special episode of the CX Leader Podcast, which is a production of Walker. We're a CX consulting firm that can help you make customer experience your biggest competitive advantage. Find out more at walkerinfo.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.